Hi, this is Peyton with Girls Gone Right.
And this is Rachel. I'm the co-host, and I'm introducing Trey Valley, who is a famous TikToker, content creator. And here you go. So, Trey, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Man, famous. I don't like that word. So I go by Trey Valley for almost a year now, which is kind of crazy. I've just been making little videos, kind of talking about my life, some of the mistakes that I made in my past in regards to forsaking my masculinity and just mistakes in dating and things like that. I've been making videos talking about that. And for some reason, people seem to really like them and get some value out of them. So I've just kept on doing it. And here I am today, almost a year later, and just overwhelmed by the amount of people that have reached out saying that they've been encouraged or edified by what I put out there. So that's why I continue to do it.
That's incredible. So, Trey, what made you want to start, getting out there, sharing your view, and putting it all out there on social media?
Yeah, you want the long version or the short version? Because we could make this an all-night thing. Basically, it was right after I'd found the Lord. I had come from complete rock bottom, which is where most of us tend to find God. And I found myself working this night shift job at a church, and that's where I really got to know him. I was pretty much alone. It was a security type job, and so I would check in with people every hour, but between those little gaps, I wasn't really doing a whole lot. So I would just sit in the sanctuary and pray and worship and had a lot of time to myself. And lo and behold, I started to get these little nuggets, just kind of lessons that I had learned, things that I was able to reflect on and put them in this little journal and didn't really think about it. Well, a year later, I picked that journal back up. And for some reason, I just felt really convicted to put those things out there. And I had a background in videography. I'd been doing videography since I was 15 years old. And so I was like, you know what, let me make a few short little videos talking about this stuff. Never expected anybody to watch it. I was honestly just really bored, and I can't be bored. I'm that type of person where I have to just have something to do creatively. So I started cranking these things out, and to my surprise, guys started just commenting things like, hey, how do I deal with addiction? How do I deal with a breakup? Like, I just got cheated on. Can you talk about these things? So I just kept responding, and lo and behold, some things kind of took off and caught a lot of flack from some people kind of on the left side of the political aisle, which was a lot of fun. And that kind of just sort of snowballed into what I'm doing right now, which I'm just enjoying the heck out of. I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, I think when you start putting really relatable content out there, it's kind of just a natural byproduct that people would relate to it. Talking about real issues, nobody lives a perfect life. When you go through and you kind of talk about the things that matter and bring them to the surface, I think you kind of draw in your audience emotionally, and that kind of ties them in together forever. So you seem to have a very loyal base, which I think is admirable. And I think it's awesome that you talk about all of these things because they're definitely on everyone's mind.
Yeah, you definitely pulled me in. You had a post. This is the one that I shared to Rachel and like how we discovered you. It was talking about red flags when dating. And I think like the premises of it was basically a man is going to take things slow with a woman, and just like, I guess like, how a relationship develops and like respecting a woman. Tell us about this. Like, cause I can't remember now. I'm like forgetting exactly what it was, but like when I saw it, I was like, wow, that is like so interesting, especially to hear from a man's perspective, because I mean, me and Rachel talk all day about these kinds of things and like dating, but like when you hear it from a man, you get a whole other perspective.
Right. Yeah. And, I've put out a lot of kind of green and red flag videos and everything like that. So I'm not sure exactly which one you're referring to, but, honestly, like when I put those things out, especially when I'm analyzing red flags, I just kind of analyze who I was in the past before meeting Christ. And I was like, okay, that was a red flag. I didn't like that I did that. And that's kind of what I paste up there is like, okay, don't go for this. Cause I know who I was. I don't know what everybody else was dealing with or what everybody else is going through, but I know who I used to be. And I'm trying to help young women avoid that. And I'm trying to help young men not become that. So, when I put out kind of like Christian dating rules or green and red flags, I'm really just looking at my past and telling people to do the opposite of what I did. So that's really where it comes from. But honestly, I think that the most telling one for me, the one that I wish that I would have taken into account a lot earlier in my life was the red flag that if they transgress with you, they'll transgress against you. And that's what I see, like, especially a lot of younger people completely disregarding, because, you know, you'll have they're lying to their family to like meet up with you or whatever the case may be. And then you just assume like, oh, they'll never lie to me. So I think that one,
right.
I got a lot of kind of guys reaching out saying, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize, you know, so, but yeah, I really enjoy making those types of videos. I never would have thought that I'd be like the Christian dating guy, because I mean, I'm not married and I've done nothing but mess up in relationships in the past, and then stayed single. But yeah, I guess God can work through however he wants to do it.
Peyton
Yeah.
and I talk about dating all the time, and we're also still single. So, you know, hey, it is what it is. I guess live and you learn. But it's really incredible that you talked about if they transgress with you, they'll transgress against you. I think that's a really impactful comment. I don't think that that's the video that we watched, but I do really enjoy what you said there. So I guess this kind of brings us into the next one. Like, what are some red flags that, from a guy's perspective, when you're dating a girl, what are some red flags that you would kind of maybe gravitate away from? And then what are some green flags? So you can kind of counter them if you want.
The number one red flag that I immediately run from is gossip. If a woman is willing to tear down people that she claims to love behind their backs, and you think that she's never going to do that to you, to her friends, and like, that's just kind of idiocy to me. And then kind of the opposite of that would be a massive green flag, is when she honors people behind their backs. When, you know, her parents aren't around or her friends aren't around, and she just goes on and on about how great they are and how thankful she is that they're in her life and everything like that. Like, that just shows a lot about her character, that she doesn't have to honor others when they're not around, but she does. That's a big sign of integrity. And I'd say that's the second red flag would be someone who is disintegrated, someone who is one way around certain groups of people and a completely different person around other groups of people. And I've personally seen this a lot with girls in their friend groups versus girls in their families. You know, the conversations at the dinner table were not the conversations going on in those girls only group chats. Like, that's the biggest thing to me. Somebody that's disintegrated, you can't even necessarily get to know them because they're not one whole person. They're
Right.
trying to figure out what person to be within what context and what environment. And so there's no solid foundation to even build a relationship with that person because they're not one whole person. And so I would take a fully integrated, messed up person over a disintegrated person that is loved in every environment and context within their lives and just keeps up the facade, because you don't necessarily know who they really are. So I would say that's like the
Yeah.
big foundational green and red flag. If they are the same person everywhere they go, you can at least evaluate and accept their flaws along with the good parts. But if you don't necessarily know who you're dealing with, you can't even begin to do that.
Yeah, Trey, it's really interesting that you said the whole gossip thing. And it's so true, because I mean, I will admit I was toxic back in my day. Like, I just didn't, I don't know if it was toxic or that I was just young and dumb and wasn't sure how to date or like how to have a healthy relationship. It was like, you know, one of my first relationships. So I made some mistakes, and I think it's so true about the gossiping thing. And it's a red flag that I haven't really heard anyone discuss, because it's so common that like people take screenshots and like that's how gossip starts. It's like, you know, you see girls like talking about this and it's so normal.
Yeah.
And it's like so normalized, but I've never heard someone be like, well, this is a red flag because they will do it behind your back. And that's true, because I can say, as a girl who had a toxic relationship, like if I'm gossiping to my boyfriend about all my friends and saying bad things about them behind their back, like I was for sure doing it to him when he turned on me and did something bad. I did that to my friends. So like, you live and you learn, you make mistakes in relationships. And I think that helps you grow as a person too. But I definitely agree with that. And I think it's interesting because no one has like come out and said that, because it is really normalized.
Yeah. It's just tea now. It's not even gossip anymore.
Yeah. They call it tea.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. One thing that I actually have talked about in like my past relationships is something that I'm always very key to mention. And these are, you know, more mature relationships now as I've gotten older. You know, something that I've always mentioned is, hey, by the way, just let's respect each other's privacy. Like there are things that are ours, there are things that are shared with friends, things like that. So I always make sure now, especially because I have learned that this is a concern, you have to be careful about what you're sharing with who, because there are certain things that are for your relationship, for your family, and it's not to separate them. It's just a respect of who that person is. And there's certain things that you don't need to share. Not everything needs to be tea. So that's sort of where I am with all of that. But as far as being one whole person, I don't think you can have a successful relationship until you know who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
You have to put in the work, and you have to do kind of live, learn, do the time, put in the work, get your priorities straight. And what works for one person isn't going to work for the other person. It just kind of depends. So know what you want and be able to articulate that so that you can find somebody who wants the same things and can make that happen for you. So
definitely. Well said, Rachel. Trey, what are some masculine traits that society is currently lacking? And I know we have lots. so the list is long.
I see. You're trying to get me on a soapbox. All right. The biggest...
Take the bait.
Yeah. I'm going to. The biggest would be accountability and personal responsibility, which is consequentially the one that most people are talking about. When you hear guys like Jordan Peterson is kind of like the main front man for advocating for masculinity, that is his main message, is personal responsibility and accountability. Because if you get that down and then surround yourself with brothers that are going to hold you accountable, you can fix any behavior of your life or any character flaw. But it's all built on the foundation of, hey, my life is a culmination of the decisions that I make and what I choose to do, where I choose to go, who I choose to hang out with. And then also I would say, again, integration, being fully integrous, having integrity. And that doesn't mean just always just telling the truth. Like, yes, of course. But we all have these kind of internal codes of ethics, whether that's kind of based on the family that we grew up in or the faith that we adhere to. We all have this code of conduct, our morals, our ethics, and being able to behave accordingly to that is not only going to make you an integrous man, but it's going to make you a secure man. I mean, the fastest way to be insecure is to do something that you know you disapprove of, that you despise, that you find disgusting. And if you spend your entire day doing things that you disapprove of, what are you going to do when you look in the mirror? You're going to disapprove of yourself. So the quickest, easiest way to gain security is to do things that you find admirable, do things that you find worthy of honor and respect. So I would say to anybody trying to become more masculine or not lose kind of these core tenets of masculinity that are just slipping away in society, is to write out your code of conduct, make it concrete, put it on paper. And that could be for a man or a woman, because we all want to have integrity and we all want to be secure, right? But this is where men can really shine and show their character is, okay, I know what you believe, but does your life line up with that? The most masculine, strong, godly men in my life that I know, that is their hallmark. That is what sets them apart, is they do not contain a conviction that they can't live up to, and they don't behave in ways that are despicable to them. So I would say that's the main stamp of a masculine man versus a non-masculine man is how integrous you are.
Yeah, Trey, that is such a good take, and it's really insightful. And I resonate with the personal responsibility thing, because I completely think that men lack the feeling of being men because they're not serving like family.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not serving society. They lost their purpose. Like, as a man, you are here to protect, to have a family, to have responsibility. And when men don't have a purpose and they don't have a duty, they're not men. Like, you take away a man's purpose and this is what you have. It's like toxic masculinity. And it's just created this huge issue in personal responsibility, and purpose, and a man that just like wanting to protect his family. And I just think that there's just like something about that, like where a man has this duty. It's changed our whole society. You pull that out from under us, and we're left with this. And especially the second thing that you said, it was, oh my gosh, guys, I just completely lost my train of thought.
That's totally fine.
It
Gonna edit that one
happens.
out. Sorry.
No worries.
I'm gonna cut that part out. But Rachel, if you want to pick it up, because sorry, I just got a
will.
work message, and I'm so sorry about that. But I just saw it pop up on my phone, and I shouldn't have read it.
Happens to
You're
me all the
okay.
time.
Tux is my dog is panting. Since we're in this, we're gonna cut it out stage. Can we
Yes.
give it like 1 second? I'm gonna boot him out of my room because he's just not being helpful.
Totally cool.
Yes, Trey, I'm literally so sorry. That never happens, and I usually put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and when I see a work message, my mind just raced
Hey.
to that. What was the second part you said? Because I really liked it, and I was
Integrity.
like, wait,
Yeah.
Integrity.
Yeah, like doing things
Yes.
that you approve of, I think, was sort
okay,
of
wait,
Okay.
I'll pick it up, and then Rachel, I'll let you swing on the integrity part. I am so sorry
Great.
about that.
totally fine.
Phone's on Do Not Disturb now. Trey, what you said about integrity is just so spot on, because I can relate when I do something that is not up to my moral standard, but I do it anyways because it's like the devil, it's temptation, and you do it just for instant gratification or whatever it is. And then you're just left with this guilt because it's just not what you want to hold yourself to. And you're to me, at the end of the day, I'm God wants better for me. And I'm here to serve God. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that wasn't serving my purpose. And that's not what God wanted for me, but I did it for myself. And that's a selfish act. And then you're just left with not having integrity.
Yeah.
And that's something that is just it tears away at your confidence. And when I see people, I guess I haven't really connected that, but when you said it and I just see others, or when I'm feeling my least confident, it's because I'm full of shame.
Yeah. And I love what you said about kind of selfless service. And kind of basically how men's job description is being taken away from them a little bit. Men will ask me, how do I become a godly man or a man of God or anything like that? And I say the hardest decision I had to make, and the one that every man has to make, is that your life is not about you anymore. Any success that you gain in this life, anything that you accomplish in this life, anything that you do in this life is for the sake of others, whether it be your family or whoever else you're trying to reach, or simply to the glory of God, right? And we all bow to something. All of us. That's just inevitable. Your life cannot be about you. And men are also, you mentioned toxic masculinity. Men are being fed this idea to utilize their masculine traits in order for their own self-interest, for greed, to fulfill their own lust, or whatever the case may be. I mean, and, we all know the main faces of that idea. But what's important to realize is that masculinity is really just agency. It's gaining an ability to do something. A masculine man has the ability to act in certain situations that a non-masculine man wouldn't have the ability to act in. And so what you choose to do with that is really based on something a little bit more, a little bit deeper inside of you, which is your value system. It's your code of ethics, your personal code of conduct. That's what you really act out of. And as men, most of us get that from our fathers. And so when you see the fatherlessness crisis, you're going to see a lot more behaviors that are kind of labeled as toxic masculinity. And, maybe it's not necessarily the masculinity itself. Maybe it's just a lacking in our value system. Because I promise you, if you give those same sets of men a good value system and ethics and morals and a personal code of conduct, they're going to do a lot of good for the world, because they have all the ability and the agency. They're just aiming it in the wrong direction. So that is a huge problem that I see with men in America, is they're either being told to have no agency or ability whatsoever and completely disarm themselves of everything that makes them men, or to use every facility that they have within themselves for their own personal self-interest and to forsake selfless service altogether. And neither of those options are necessarily wholesome or beneficial for anybody. So it's a mess right now.
No. It is a mess. And kind of what you said too, to counter on the female side, I think there's just this overall message for everyone where it's this push of self-love, and that's all that we focus on. We've kind of lost this ability to serve others, or the interest to serve others. So when you take that away from people, and everything about your life is just revolving around you, you are the center of your own universe. You're not taking time to assist your family or help out a friend or do something that absolutely benefits you, not at all. in the least, donate, go to church, have a, volunteer somewhere in your community. When you do something that is not for yourself and you walk away from that, you feel so much more fulfilled than you ever did doing something just for yourself. It's like I could go to the store and buy a bunch of stuff and that would fill me with happiness for maybe 10 minutes, or I could go and kind of receive a lasting experience because I served someone else. And I think that kind of ties back to this relationship thing. Relationships are based on service to each other. It's a commitment to prioritize someone other than yourself and consider someone else's feelings and how they may need, what they might need in that moment. And so if you're unable to prioritize other people when you're not in a relationship, you definitely can't prioritize your significant other when you are in one, because you haven't practiced that value system. You have no code of ethics or something that you hold yourself to regardless of your relationship status. And so sometimes I think that's sort of a huge issue. And then just masculine men in general, they are attractive. Women want someone who pick the date spot. That's all I'm saying. Pick the date spot, make the decision, be decisive, and this kind of brings me into a different question for you. We were talking about integrity, all these different things, but I mentioned, dating. What is your thought on online dating and dating apps in general? What do you think about this?
I'm not a fan. I hate it so much, I'll be honest. So my problem with online dating, and I get every excuse in the book when I talk about this, from like, oh, there's no single girls in my church or this or that and the other. And I'm like, dude, figure it out, man. Like there's plenty of wonderful women in the world to pick from. The finding the girl part is not the problem for us in our modern day society. It's, we don't know how to be in a committed relationship. And part of the reason we don't is because of the culture that dating apps have created, which is a very consumer mindset of dating and of relationships. And like you mentioned, relationships are completely the opposite. It's giving. And you can even see this. This is self-evident in the feelings of loneliness, right? When you're feeling lonely, maybe you've been single for a while or whatever the case may be, right? I don't know. You're not feeling lonely because you're not receiving affection. You're feeling lonely because you have all of this love inside of you and nowhere to put it. You don't have anybody to serve. You don't have anybody to show affection to, or to help, or to hold through difficult times. That's what you're missing. And so this whole consumer mindset around relationships, and which inevitably leads to hookup culture, and I'm sure we'll get into that whole mess of things and how it's,
of course,
how it's messed up the world. But I just think that a convenient method of finding somebody, and I've said it before, if you can find love in the midst of comfort and ease and convenience, then it's probably not worth having. Part of what,
Yeah. I will say, trust me, I've used dating apps. I'm guilty. I've done it just because,
same.
I feel like I
I'm
work
still
a lot.
on them.
Yeah, it's like I just don't feel like I have the time or am in the places to meet these people. However, I will say my most meaningful relationships, and I guess the people that I've dated that was a long relationship and committed, those people I all met in person. There wasn't one relationship from a dating app where I was like, you know what, I think this is the person I'm going to marry. All those people, someone that I thought I was going to marry, didn't meet on a dating app. My serious relationship in college, not a dating app. And I don't know, my most meaningful relationships came from meeting someone in person. And the difference that I see is when I go on a date with someone I meet on an app, I'm like, great, we have the same values, we matched, I checked out his profile, I kind of know that we're he's what I'm looking for and I might be what he's looking for. But then you do go sit down and to me, a lot of the things that I see that's off for me is it does feel like they are it doesn't matter if it was me or someone else that just kind of fit those things that he was looking for on my profile. It was the convenience. And they were just you know what, I want a girlfriend, or I want this now, and I want to have somebody, but you're here and I like some of the stuff that you answered on your profile, or you had a good prompt. And if it would have just been anyone else, you would be fine with them sitting across the table from you too. It did just feel like a convenience thing, which I'm not saying I'm not guilty on my end too. I will say that sometimes it is like the convenience of it. But I haven't really met someone on a dating app that gave me a meaningful relationship. And like, that could just be like, you could.
So to counter that, my last meaningful relationship did start from a dating app. So that actually worked out really well. He was a great guy. It just didn't work out for just a few different reasons. But the bigger issue that I have with dating apps, and the reason that I'm so opposed to them, is sort of what you said about the consumer culture. It's this idea that this guy might be good enough, but there could be someone better. And so you continue to swipe, or there might be someone just kind of pulling from, the group chat messages. There might be someone cuter. There might be someone more attractive, might be someone who's funnier or checks off one more little list, or someone taller, whatever the case is. It's an interesting kind of consumer mindset where you're dating, in theory, multiple people at one time. You have the option to date multiple people at one time, and you sort of curate this falsified version of what that person is in your head based on, 5 pictures, I think, maybe 5 pictures and a couple of prompts. And you sort of have to gauge, okay, what is the aura of this person? How does this person respond? Do they list that they're a Christian? And then you have to figure out, okay, do they actually go? I'm Catholic, so bonus points for people who are. It's interesting, but it's this thought in the back of your head of there might be something better. Right. And I think that's the huge issue with dating apps. But in general, I'd love to meet someone in person. I'm just not entirely sure how to go about that. Because
perfect question for Trey. Oh, boy. Trey, where do you find potential suitors?
Okay. I get this question.
I don't call them boyfriends. I call them suitors. I'm like, that's a potential suitor.
I always think of, what's that George Clooney movie where they like break out of prison or something, and these 2 little girls are like, he's a suitor. I love that quote. So I get this question a lot, and I try not to give like an outright answer. I just ask him, like, okay, picture the kind of person that you want to be with. What values do they have? What do they do? What do they like? And then think to yourself, where would that kind of person hang out? And then go there. For me, church. That's like, I want a good Christian girl. Where do good Christian girls hang out? They hang out at church. So I'm going to hang out at church. Even more than that, like for somebody in the same boat, serve teams. Because you go a level deeper, somebody that's not just interested in going to church and receiving, but like, hey, I want to give to this. I see some good being done here and I want to be a part of it. Like, okay, join a serve team, right? Volunteer, go, like, just do things, be out and about in the world. And I always say, at least from the men's side of things, there's the old fairy tale of the prince saving the princess or whatever. But he always has to slay the dragon first. And usually the princess is right behind the dragon. So wherever you find a dragon, that's a pretty good place to go to find your princess. So from the guy's perspective, just, hey, look for a dragon to slay. Look for things to accomplish and do with your life. Look for a mountain to climb. And in that process, not only are you going to find the right person, but you're going to become the right person, which is infinitely more important. Because if you can become the right person, those boxes that almost need to be checked become a little bit less important. You become a little bit less consumeristic in that process because you have confidence in your ability to walk through this life with somebody else. You have confidence in your ability to serve someone else for the rest of your life and have fidelity towards only them. I would propose the possibility that maybe there's nothing worse than having absolutely every single last thing you want in a partner. Maybe there's nothing worse than having the perfect spouse. Because then where's the journey in that? Where's the growth in that? I know that question had nothing to do with that, but you got me on a tangent and I followed it out through the end. So yeah, guys, find a dragon.
We love that. Love that. Yeah. And then the other takeaway that I heard was, you attract what you are. So if you are not, you won't find, I think if you have an unrealistic expectation or list of whatever you want in somebody and you're not willing to fulfill that list also, then lazy. You're not going to find it and nothing's ever going to work.
Absolutely. Or when you find them, they're not going to be attracted to you because they're where you should be. Why would they want to mess with you?
Exactly. You
I
could
think
be the
it's-
red flag. I tell that to people all the time. I was like, are you the red flag? Like, are you the problem?
I think that like you truly attract what you are, and it's so true when you basically like when you're looking for something, people are always like, oh well, I'm looking at a guy that has this and this, and I'm like, well, are you that? You want someone who's successful, you want someone that's driven, you want someone that is like excelling in their career and works hard, but are you doing that? And people will be like, well, no. And I'm like, well, then why would you how would you attract that? Like, you're just like, you're like putting your hands out and like asking for something so great, but then what are you like putting out there in return?
No personal responsibility or integrity.
Yes. Yeah. And it
There
comes
you
down
go.
to that. And I'm like, what kind of games are we playing? And like dating has just like the dating culture, like this just gets me so passionate because I think it's just come to a place. It's really sad because a relationship is such a beautiful thing. And to me, I'm like, I want to find my person. Like, I'm not settling. Like, I want the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And I think that just seeing these trends, like the ick, or like, just like people talking about horrible dating stories, or like having a main chick and they have main characters, but they have like side characters too. And like, they're like, I'm dating all these people. And it's like all these TikTok dating trends and like swiping and like these, people go on these dating challenges. Like, how many dates can I get in a month? And it's like taken away from the beauty of what a relationship is supposed to be, like sharing your life with someone, having someone know you better than anyone else. And like, I was in a long-term relationship, and the best thing about being in a relationship, like a committed relationship with someone, is like they know you better than anyone else. And like you get to share this thing that like no one else gets to have, and it's like the most beautiful thing. But like when you see, like, it's like, okay, this is really beautiful, but then like culture's like, okay, we're gonna make it disgusting
Yes.
and throw up on it and do all these terrible things. And I'm like, actually, you guys are like ruining dating. Like, dating in a relationship is supposed to be incredible, and it's supposed to be this amazing experience. And like, it's just, they've just taken it and like turned it into something so evil.
I mean, if you look at the way that even our grandparents went about relationships versus the way that we do, I mean, they were getting married at what, 19, 20 years old? So that's like max. I mean,
Young.
my grandparents got married at, I think, 16 or 17, so we don't have to talk about that. But they grew up together, and they grew into each other. And they, from the outset, before they even had a life to build, they had nothing. Everything that they built was intertwined so deeply together. And that's just not the case anymore. Now we're encouraged to, get the college degree first, right? That's the order. Then you get the career down, you become financially stable and all of these other things. You build up your own life. And then you find another person that's fully built up their life, and you try to integrate those things, and it doesn't quite work. And I mean, then you can even go back to the masculinity and femininity thing, where women are now having to fend for themselves until age 27, 28, 29. And then they get into a relationship and we expect them to be fully feminine. And it's like, dude, she's been taking care of herself for the past 10 years. Like, what do you expect? Right. And so I think that's probably the main issue, is like, we don't grow up together anymore. Back then, commitment came first. And then the infatuation and all of that followed in this almost exponential trickle flow that lasts decades. And now it's like this fleeting thing, and you better hope that within that time of infatuation, you build up enough commitment to sustain you. So it's just such a broken model
Right.
for long-term relationship. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that.
It's really like the lack of commitment. Like, you're right, commitment does need to come first. Before you download that dating app, before you even go on a date with someone, like, you need to ingrain in your head, before you go sit down across the table from someone, or whatever your first date is, like, if I like this, I'm committing to this. Or like, if I like truly like see something here, I'm committing to this. Not that I'm going to go home, I'm going to start swiping on other people, or I'm going to start seeing other people and just like play the game, like see what turns out. Like, I'll play my cards right. Like, we'll see what happens. And like, they're playing like all of these games, but it's like, that's like, also like, I'm like, how do you like, I don't know. People think it's like a mind game or something, like where they think that they can manipulate, and it's like fun and stuff because it turns into gossip and tea, and it's like a whole thing. But I'm like, also like, you're looking for something like so deep, but you're making it seem so small.
This is where I think hookup culture has infiltrated everything.
Bingo.
And this is, so when you're dating, or you're having a conversation, or you're on a date, and then, as you said, you go home and maybe you're like, I don't know. Who do you really get to know within the first 5 seconds of meeting them? They could, now look, sometimes it just doesn't work, right? You go, you know immediately this is not my person, and that's okay. No worries. They'll find someone else, you'll find someone else, it'll be okay. But the whole idea that you go home and then you start, you continue to swipe, the idea that there's something better. And also, this is such a habitual thing that you do all of the time. So then how are you supposed to distinguish between a meaningful connection and an unmeaningful connection, especially if you're willing to just kind of give everything away for free all the time? Guys or girls, because this goes both ways, that kind of just extend themselves to whoever's there at any given moment. They've lost the ability to tell the difference between someone who actually means something and someone who doesn't, because they give it away for free constantly. And then they wonder why their lives are a train wreck, or why every time the relationship doesn't work out, they spiral and they can't handle it. And their brain goes 112 miles an hour and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm panicking. It's because you sabotaged your own mental sanity. You kind of gave it all away and you tossed it. And then to recover, you get back in the game and you immediately start going back to the exact thing that broke you in the first place. So it's a repetitive, vicious cycle. So tell us your take on hookup culture.
All right, I will do that. So I think something interesting to point out about what you just said is you just described an addictive cycle. The patent hallmark of an addiction is that whenever you feel kind of the pitfall of that, you go back to the addiction in order to reach another peak, and the baseline gets lower and lower and lower. That's what makes an addiction an addiction. And as a result of hookup culture, I promise you, there's more 20 to 30-year-olds that are sex addicts and don't even know it than there are 20 to 30-year-old alcoholics. I promise you that's the case. And
I wouldn't disagree with that.
It's absolutely ridiculous. So I would say this to anybody who's still stuck in that game or playing that game: evaluate the effort that you put in to win that game, and then the reward you get for all your hard-earned work. So let's play the hookup culture game, right? At least as a man, right? These studies that show that women believe 80% of men are unattractive, those are all done on dating apps. So that's not necessarily the case within the monogamous matrimony game, as I like to call it. That's only the case within the hookup culture game. So first of all, as a man, you have to outwork all those other men to reach that top 20%. To become attractive to a woman, to even, be eligible to play the game. And then for all your hard-earned work doing that, you get probably a sex addiction. You probably pick up a whole lot of insecurities because you've dehumanized and basically turned yourself into a product. So you're constantly scrutinizing yourself. Probably might pick up some diseases or something. Like, there's practical consequences to this stuff. Possibly a child or two out of wedlock, right? These are your rewards for all of your hard-earned work. Congratulations. Now let's flip over to the monogamous matrimony game. Rather than competing to sleep with as many women as humanly possible, you're just trying to find one good woman. One good woman. And you pursue her with everything you got. Take her on some dates, spend some money on her, get her some flowers, get to know her family, get to know her and who she is, let her get to know you. And, you get a ring, ask her a question, and congratulations. You've effectively won a lifetime of happiness, companionship, a future family. You've secured a future for yourself. I think that there's an obvious, desirable game to play between these two. And I'll be honest, it's beyond me why we continue to pick the hookup culture game. And don't be mistaken, I played that game, which is why I'm so heavily opposed to it. And I know why I chose to play is I was trying to prove something. I was trying to prove that I was good enough, or that I was enough, period, rather than finding that in something a little bit more sturdy and foundational and secure. I found that in the chase, the escapade, right? And so I don't know why everybody else chooses to play that game, but it's very obvious that as far as just a reward factor for all of your hard-earned effort, that the monogamous matrimony game is by far a lot more fun to play and a lot more rewarding.
Yeah, I like that game a lot more. And I love what you said. I also as a human, we all make mistakes, and I have participated in the hookup culture, and I've learned greatly from that. And I know now what I shouldn't be doing. And I think it comes down to people. I saw this on the Whatever podcast. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it's just basically a bunch of like young kids going off saying nonsensical things. And one of these girls was just like, oh, I had like sex with like 3 guys this weekend. I have 1 main character and 6 side hoes. And it was like an atrocious thing. And I'm like, I think that's like, it's so sad to me because it's so
upsetting.
It's so, yeah, it's so broken. But I think it comes down to like, people don't see the value that they should see in themselves, and they give themselves, or everyone has access to them. There's like no such thing as like, I'm holding value to myself. And I think when someone holds value to themselves, like, like I'm taking this slow. I want to make sure that this relationship is right, and they have these values, and they're holding themselves to a standard instead of just, anyone can have this and like it doesn't even matter. They're so much more desirable when someone can hold themselves to a standard. And it's really sad to see especially these young girls. These girls are like 16, and like I've been there, done that, and it's just a really hard lesson to learn. But it is just really sad to see that this culture, they don't think that they're worth anything, or like, they won't say that, right? They won't say that it's not because they don't have self-worth. They'll just say because, oh, I don't care. I don't have feelings. I'm not going to catch the feels is what the kids call it. They're like, oh, I'm not going to catch the feels. I just have, lots of guys are into me and like whatever. And it's just like, to them, it's just like sex. And they're like, it's just an action. And it's just so sad because I'm like, it's not though. And when you realize that it's not just sex. Like it's not even that's not even what sex is for. Sex is like to love someone, to connect with someone. And when you take that away, I'm like, it's so evil and empty. And like you leave, I can promise you, like you can hook up with as many people as you want, but you will leave that feeling so lonely and so sad versus having sex with someone that you actually love. It's like a fulfilling moment and you feel so connected to that person. It's just like, wow, I love you so much, versus hooking up with someone that you met at a bar. It feels like the most disgusting thing, and you feel so shameful. And again, it like hurts your confidence. You have like this low self-esteem because you just did a really shameful thing, and you're like, wow, like if I'm going to treat myself like that, like I don't even hold myself to a standard. Like my standard is down here. Someone could just take me home from a bar. Like if that's the standard you're giving to someone else, like you're holding yourself to even lower standards. And it's really sad.
Yeah. It really does break my heart, especially from the woman's perspective as well, because as a woman, at least like in my traditional worldview, you're basically like the hidden precious gem waiting to be discovered by the best man possible. That's what you are. And, when you're constantly put on display for everybody to see and everybody to touch and handle, like, oh, this is so great, and let me just put you back and leave. Well, what happens when that good, awesome man comes along? You don't feel worthy anymore. And I'm not one of those people that believes that like body count equates to worth. I think that's just ridiculous. But the problem is that you internally think that and you feel that. And so how you're able to interact with and engage in intimacy and even commitment with that person changes because you've devalued the kind of the precious thing that's inside of you, the most intimate part of you, to such a level that you don't think it's worth a lot. And that's the problem. It's not what everybody else or society thinks you're worth. It's no, right. You don't think you're worth a lot. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And just also to tack on another perspective is, I grew up watching, so my parents, best people ever, they have one of the strongest marriages I've ever seen. I grew up having the privilege of watching that. So because I grew up watching that, and because I grew up with 2 parents who generally, they enjoy each other's company, hanging out with their 3 kids was fun for them. Most of the time, we weren't totally insane, but hanging out with us wasn't a chore. We weren't a job. Their life and just what they built together was fulfilling to them. So when you create that and then you go on, regardless of whether or not you grew up with that, right? You can choose differently for yourself. You choose something like that for yourself. And then what you're able to do is replicate that for your future children. And what you end up with is just this cycle of really healthy, put together young individuals who want to seek something more than what they were given. And what it ends up doing is you can change the tides just by creating strong, healthy, happy families. And it's as simple as finding your person and committing to that person and committing to building a life with them, whatever that may look like. And it's different for every person. You know, everyone has different nuances and personality types. And you just got to find the one that jives with yours. But the basic message of what we're all after is the same. And so when you take away that self-worth and that feeling that you're worth something, that takes a really long time to heal on the inside. And you can't even have a relationship until you fix that on the inside. So, you know, tack on a year or two of work to go ahead and backtrack the commitment. You know, you have to recommit to yourself before you can commit to somebody else, get all your priorities and your ducks in a row, and then you're ready. The work is immense, but once you put it in, you're in a much better spot. So I think the last question, I think we have a couple of followers who had asked a couple questions. So we're going to just hit you with two questions.
Oh, joy. All right, let's do it.
So, what practical things can we do to enjoy our single season? So if you are single, what are some practical things that we're doing to enjoy
I love
that
it.
season?
So after I found the Lord, he basically told me, I felt him tell me during a worship service, if you just stay single and just focus on me for 2 years, I'll turn you into a man worth marrying. So I was like, okay, I guess for 2 years I'm going to be single. And there were moments of despair in that, but what gave me such ultimate joy is learning how to serve, learning how to be others focused. And the more that you do that, the more you realize that you have a place in this world beyond just enjoying the company of another person. You have a function and something to fulfill. You have a purpose. Like a marriage is such a big part of your life. Yes, absolutely. But that other 60, 70, 30%, however much you want to say, that's what you get to explore when you're single. And you also get to solidify who you are. And a lot of that, and I do believe that you can work on yourself and you can grow and you can become a better person in a relationship. That's actually the sign of a good, healthy relationship. But for some reason, at least with me personally, at a young age, growth and self-improvement goes 10 times faster when I'm single. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a focus thing. Maybe it's a time thing.
Yeah, I think it's a focus
but
thing.
I'm able to grow and improve myself so much better. Like throughout that 2-year process, if you put that other guy in front of me that I was 2.5 years ago now, which is weird, I would not recognize him because of just everything that's happened in that time period. And when I started dating again, I talked to like 1 or 2 girls and I was like, okay, God, I'm ready to go back out into the season of singleness right now, right? These people are crazy. Like, can we just go back there and hang out for a little bit? So I promise you, you may not necessarily miss that season of your life, but you will always look upon it fondly if you go through it with some dignity and with some initiative and some purpose.
I love that. Yeah, that's so true. And honestly, be still and know. I feel like it's a season, but I mean, you only have the season for a moment. So it's something that you just have to, really enjoy it for what it is and take it as just like time to reflect and build and be the person that you're looking for. So one last question from our followers: how to navigate rejection gracefully, both as the rejected and the rejector.
See, I am so glad that I am not a woman for this precise reason. I am horrible at rejecting people. I hate it. It's my least favorite thing in the world to do. I would rather be rejected 10 times over. But what I would say, the key, I'll do getting rejected first. The key is just to lean into it and to practice, which sounds just utterly psychotic, right? But especially a lot of the advice that's given to young men right now is advice predicated around not going through emotional pain, not going through disappointment, not facing these difficult emotional situations. And my take is like, if there's anything to be reckless about, it's that. Like, recklessly go after and face rejection. And this is something that I've told men is like, don't ask out the safe bet. Like, if you know that a girl likes you and has a crush on you, unless you think like, oh, this girl is the one, don't ask her out. Ask out the girl that you truly, that for some reason you shouldn't, but you put her on a pedestal and you just think, man, there's no way I could get that girl. Yeah, ask her out. that is who you really need to ask out, because what you're doing is you're building up a good rapport with yourself. The question is, how do you live with yourself if you don't ask out the girl that you've been thinking about all day for 4 days straight? How do you not do that and then go in the mirror and look at yourself in the mirror, right? So I would say seek it out and practice. From the reject door side, I would say accept the effort, but reject the person. So maybe honor the effort of like, hey, and this has happened to me, like for the first time after this season of singleness, because I used to always play it safe. I got rejected and I was like, I don't like how that feels. I guess I need to do it again. But the person that did it was so incredibly good with it. She was just like, hey, I really appreciate like the effort that you put in and the direct approach and all of that stuff. I'm just not interested. I'm sorry. But I know that you're going to have success with that because you're doing it the right way. Right. So literally all you have to say is, I'm not interested. You don't have to make an excuse. You don't have to lie. You don't have to try to make them feel better. That is not your job. Your job is to be honest and to bring clarity and to not leave them with hope. That's your job as the rejecter. But you can do that and still say, hey, way to go, man. And give them props for their bravery and their courage, if nothing else. Now, if they asked you out over like Snapchat or something, just block them. Like, I don't even care at that point. But yeah, you honor the courage and the bravery, but you reject the person as bluntly as you possibly can.
Wow. That's incredible advice. And I do think that there's a way to go about rejecting, because it does take courage for a man to ask out a woman. Like, that's not an easy thing to do, especially in today's society where it's really hard to find a courageous man that's willing to do that. So you have to like tread lightly, but like also, make it known that like they're not going to get their hopes up. Not that they're going to be thinking
direct,
about you in a week from now.
Kind.
Yeah, direct but kind. And yeah, this has just been a wealth of information, and I'm so glad that we got to do this. And I think it's really good for our listeners. We've been having people ask us to have a guy on Girls Gone Right, because we have me and Rachel just like bouncing our ideas off of each other, and it's fabulous. But to have a guy like come on here and give that side,
share a different perspective. It's a different lens. It's a different
so insightful
view.
Yeah, I mean, contrary to what society thinks, men and women are different. And we think differently. We have different, sets of emotions. So I think it's like really interesting to have a guy come on here and talk about what it's like to date traditionally and like how to find that, how to navigate that in today's society, because we know it's like really hard to date in 2023. So this is it's been absolutely incredible and a wealth of information. And I think that it will help our listeners navigate their dating life. And it will definitely
navigate
help.
the single season.
Absolutely.
We got
And
this.
thank you guys so much for having me on.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was great.
Yeah, thank you
we're
so
glad
much,
that you had
Trey.
fun. We did too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you guys for listening to Girls Gone Right.